For 5 centuries, the history of Anne Boleyn has been buried under a mountain of propaganda. We are told she was a manipulative seductress, the six-fingered witch who enchanted a king and tore a country apart. But those stories were the deliberate creations of her political enemies. The reality is more complex. Anne Boleyn was a highly educated political strategist whose actions provided the occasion for Henry VIII to declare independence from the Vatican. Her intellect was sharpened far from the isolated English countryside. Serving in the courts of the Netherlands and France, she absorbed the radical ideas of Renaissance humanism and mastered the brutal, intricate game of courtly politics. When she returned to England in 1522, she found a king in crisis. Henry VIII was trapped in a marriage to Catherine of Aragon that had failed to produce a male heir. Without a son to secure the line, Henry feared the country would collapse back into civil war the moment he died. Henry quickly pressured Anne to become his mistress, but she had seen her own sister, Mary, used and discarded in that role. Anne refused to be a royal hobby. She held out for a proposal of marriage. She understood that her survival depended on the crown. To get it, she would have to engineer a geopolitical shift massive enough to displace a sitting queen and break the power of the Catholic Church in England. Anne's primary weapon wasn't seduction, but theology. She introduced Henry to the banned reformist writings of William Tyndale, books that were then considered heretical and illegal in England. These texts contained a revelation for the king, the argument that monarchs are accountable only to God, entirely bypassing the legal and spiritual authority of the Pope. This ideology provided Henry with the exact justification he needed. If the Pope had no authority over a king, Henry didn't need Rome's permission to annul his marriage and marry Anne. Anne didn't just offer Henry a path to a new wife. She handed him the blueprint to claim total authority over both the laws of the state and the souls of his subjects. The strategy worked. Henry broke with Rome, declared himself the supreme head of the church, and married Anne. To cement her legitimacy, she was crowned with St. Edward's crown, a rare honor usually reserved for the reigning monarch, signaling her status as a political partner rather than just a consort. Anne used her queenship to actively reshape the English religious landscape. She protected reformist merchants, appointed evangelical chaplains, and actively influenced the king's ecclesiastical policy to promote the study of the scriptures. This active role put her on a collision course with Thomas Cromwell, the king's chief minister. As the crown began dissolving the Catholic monasteries, the two clashed over what to do with the massive influx of wealth. This diagram shows the two competing visions for that money. Cromwell demanded the funds be funneled directly into the royal treasury to strengthen the state's finances. Anne publicly fought to redirect that wealth into schools and charities, treating the Reformation as a spiritual mission, not a fiscal one. By acting as a formidable political rival rather than a submissive wife, Anne made a dangerous enemy of Cromwell. She had stepped outside the boundaries of her role, and in the Tudor court, that was a fatal mistake. Despite her political power, Anne's security still rested on biology. After the birth of Princess Elizabeth, a series of miscarriages began to erode Henry's confidence in the marriage. In January 1536, the political landscape shifted again. Catherine of Aragon died. For the first time in a decade, Henry could remarry without being forced back to his first wife by the Pope. The pressure reached a breaking point when Henry was knocked unconscious in a near-fatal jousting accident. Just days later, Anne miscarried a male child on the very day of Catherine's funeral. Henry, viewing these events as a divine rebuke, turned his attention to a new woman, Jane Seymour. Unlike Anne, Jane was presented as a traditional, quiet, and submissive alternative. Sensing the king's desire for a new wife, Thomas Cromwell moved quickly. He aligned himself with Anne's conservative enemies to orchestrate a rapid, legal strike against the queen. Anne had helped Henry build a machine of total monarchical authority. Now that she was no longer useful to the succession, Cromwell used that same machine to dispose of her. The coup was swift. Within days of the initial investigation, Anne, her brother George, and 4 other men were arrested and imprisoned within the Tower of London. Cromwell manufactured a series of shocking indictments to ensure a conviction: multiple counts of adultery, incest, and a treasonous conspiracy to kill the king. Modern analysis of the trial records proves these charges were physically impossible. For instance, the indictment claimed Anne committed adultery at Westminster on a day when palace records place her miles away at Greenwich. Other alleged affairs supposedly took place while Anne was in strict traditional seclusion following the birth of her daughter, a time when she was never alone and under constant supervision by her ladies. The factual errors were irrelevant. In the system Anne helped create, the law became an engine of state, used to define the king's desired reality and vacate the throne. On May 17th, the process reached a peak of absurdity. Archbishop Cranmer annulled the marriage, legally declaring that Anne had never been Henry's wife, yet she was still sent to the scaffold to die for committing adultery against him. Anne met her death on May 19th with calm, macabre humor, famously noting she had but a little neck. To ensure a swift end, Henry summoned a specialized swordsman from France to perform the execution. In her final speech, Anne chose political strategy over personal protest. She praised the king's mercy, knowing that any challenge to the verdict could lead Henry to take his anger out on her infant daughter, Elizabeth. The erasure was immediate. Parliament bastardized her daughter, and Henry was formally betrothed to Jane Seymour the very next day. Posthumously, Anne won. The daughter she died to shield, Elizabeth I, eventually took the throne, using the same political maneuvers her mother pioneered to successfully complete the Reformation that Anne had set in motion.